Welcome back to AP World History. This is Chapter 28. We're talking about World War One. Certainly, we talked about the causes, the people involved, the countries. United States not getting into the war until 1917. Um, Certainly, propaganda was used in Germany and by the Allies, particularly the British, were very good at it. In fact, they tightly controlled every piece of information that was released from the front, so that casualties, how the war was going, was never fully reported to the citizens. Of course, when people don't write home, and there's an announcement of the death of someone, millions of men are going to be killed. Um, but a lot of that was kept from the public, and particularly from the Americans. Uh, the industrial might of each one of these nations is going to be directed at the war effort. Certainly, women are going to be an integral part of World War One, filling non-combatant roles in industry, uh, nursing, so forth. Certainly, troops were recruited from the colonies to fight for the Triple Entente. The British blockade pretty much kept Germany from reaching her colonies to get raw materials. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India are going to supply uh, materials to Great Britain and also troops. The Germans' main support is going to be the Ottoman Empire that comes in 1915, believing that the Germans are going to win the war and they want to be on the winning side and perhaps protect their territories and take back some of the areas that they had lost. During this time, the Young Turk leaders assaulted the Armenians. Uh, Certainly a genocide. 1 million Armenians are killed through this. This is remembered by the Armenians inside America and in Armenia, blaming the Turks for this terrible disaster. Now, this shows the women at war. This shows recruitment posters trying to get women into the Navy to work as clerks and non-combatants so they could be freed men to work on the front. Women certainly worked in ammunition factories, building the cannons and the war materials, the tanks, the airplanes, and so forth. This is a French women's factory here making war materials, from hand grenades to bullets and so forth. German women were doing the same in their country, supporting, being patriotic, and serving their country at time of war. In America, this shows a group of young ladies going out and work in the fields and in industry. The YWCA applied this poster and showing women who could serve their country. The Red Cross certainly is involved in this, women working as nurses tending to the sick and the wounded. Economic and imperial rivalry, you can see here in the green, the dark green, the Triple Entente. This is post 1914 allies in the lighter green. The brown represents Central Powers, and then the light brown represents a neutral state. So much of South America was not involved in this. Africa, which is really carved up by the various European nations, is going to be involved on a limited basis into the war. Certainly, there was aggressive nationalism, each side believing they were right, and certainly everyone is going to be pointing the finger at someone else. Posters of wartime propaganda. This was to make you hate the Germans. Australian poster here. American poster showing how brutal the Germans were when they invaded uh, um, Belgium, raping women and pillaging and so forth. Financing the war, painting the Germans as monsters and encouraging people to buy more bonds to support the war. Here shows a German poster of a little baby playing with a snake. Of course, snakes are evil, and that's the way it's portrayed here, and that you're really here to protect your children. Eventually, America is going to join the war in 1917. Wilson had promised to keep America out of the war when it broke out in 1914. He always believed that he could be some negotiator. He could maybe bring the parties to the table. America is going to profit from the war. When he ran for president again in 1916, he promised that he would not let the American boys go to war. America has been practicing an isolationist policy for 100 years, and they don't want to get involved in foreign affairs. German U-boats certainly sank a lot of Allied shipping. The Lusitania is sunk, and 128 Americans die off the coast of Ireland, and this enrages a lot of Americans. The Germans had what they called unrestricted warfare, sub-warfare, and they would sink any ship in the war zone. Interestingly enough, the Lusitania did carry war supplies on a civilian liner, which was against the Geneva Convention. America will find itself selling what it makes to the Allies because the blockade preventing it from getting to Germany and her allies. Eventually, the Germans will stop this unrestricted German submarine warfare at the assistance of Wilson, but will resume it again. And American ships and people going to the war zone will be killed. The tipping point comes when the Germans send a telegram to Mexico, the Zimmerman Note, encouraging them to attack the United States. This seems to be the last straw. Wilson who's been telling Americans that they shouldn't be in the war, has now got the job of convincing them that this will be a war to end all wars and make the world safe for democracy. And so he'll have to sell that to the American people. Okay. And this is the sinking of the Lusitania by a German submarine. Allied ships sunk by U-boats. The little dots show where ships were sunk. These convoys bringing stuff from the United States to Great Britain and France. This is a copy of the Zimmerman Note, or at least an explanation about it, encouraging the Mexican government, if they'll side with the Germans, that the Germans will help them get back the Southwest territory they'd lost in the Mexican-American War in 1845. Eventually, the Yanks are coming. The Yanks are coming. This is a welcome relief to the French and to the British. They are pretty much worn out for fighting 3 years of war. By 1917, the Russians have surrendered. There were many cases of mutiny or close to mutiny on the Western Front because of all the casualties and the horrible conditions. But the Americans are going to tip the scales, and because of their entry into the war, they're going to help end World War I. On the Eastern Front, there was Gallipoli. This turned out to be a disaster for the Allies. They tried to attack the Ottoman Empire. Eventually, they had to withdraw. Certainly, they attacked the Turkish cavalry in Palestine. Lawrence of Arabia, he was part of this in 1916 and 1918, rallying the Arabs to drive out the Turks with some success. The Tsar is going to personally take over the army, which is again going to be a disaster. The Russians are just mauled by the Germans. It certainly became a war of attrition, trying to wear out each other. How many men can you waste on the battlefield and consume war materials? Who will last? Who will be the last man standing? Who will be there to turn out the lights? Here shows some of the major battles. Uh, Basically, in AP world, there's not much interest in battles. Military history, certainly, if you're interested in that, there's a number of good books and places where you can go. But they don't ask much about major battles in any AP exam. This shows the Western Front, and it shows the battle lines, no man's land between the Allies and the uh, Triple Alliance, the Central Powers. This shows a picture of the trench warfare. A horrible place. Um, Artillery shells, explosion, machine guns. The mechanization, the technology was further advanced than the tactics used by both sides. Men would run across this no man's land through barbed wire and be cut down by machine guns, and this would go back and forth, and millions of men are going to be killed. The Somme, the casualties, 60,000 British soldiers are killed in one day, and over 1 million killed in 5 months. So this is ooh, I hope that scared you a little bit. War is hell. A lot of amputees, certainly a lot of wounded, 20 million. And these are some of the pictures of amputees who lost legs, prostheses used to replace the legs that were lost. This shows a German cartoon fit for active service, and of course they were scraping the bottom of the barrel in 1918. Eventually, Russia is going to be knocked out of the war simply because of its own inept uh, tactics and the fact that it just doesn't have the resources to go toe to toe with the Germans. When the Americans come, they're going to stall the German advance. When the Russians get out of the war, and they will sign an unconditional treaty. They just want to get it. The Bolsheviks will take over Russia. And then the Germans will transfer the troops to the Western Front, and they will continue to fight. But eventually, the tipping of the scales pushes it towards the Allies, and Germany will have to surrender. The war claims a number 20 million wounded, 10 million killed. Shows a picture of the casualties of the war. America suffered the least because they weren't in the war as long as the others. The Treaty of Versailles is going to be signed. Certainly there's a peace conference in 1919, and Germany is blamed for the war, and they will have to pay reparations. Ottoman Empire is going to be dismantled. Germany will lose its colonies overseas, and the Austria-Hungary Empire will be dissolved. These are some of the new nations created in 1923. Failed peace. Many of the treaties passed, but the Treaty of Versailles is the most important. And it shows Germany being blamed for the war and having to pay $32 billion to the Triple Entente. It shows territories lost. League of Nations was formed, but it is going to be a failure. It shows the dark blue, the people involved in the League of Nations. And we'll stop right here.